When someone begins to wake up, the first thing they notice is the noise. Not the noise of traffic or voices or music, the noise of everything pretending to be something else. They sit in conversations that once felt comfortable, and suddenly the words sound hollow. People are laughing, but nothing is funny. People are talking, but nothing is being said, and they realize they've been doing the same thing, performing, participating, playing along, not because they wanted to deceive anyone, but because that's what everyone does. That's what connection looked like, until it didn't. At first, they think something is wrong with them. They wonder why they can't just enjoy things anymore. Why the party feels exhausting before it even starts. Why small talk feels like slow suffocation. They try to push through it. They smile when they're supposed to smile. They nod when they're supposed to agree. But inside, something is shifting. A quiet voice is asking, "Why are we doing this?" And they don't have a good answer. The people around them start to notice, not in a dramatic way, just small comments. "You've been quiet lately. You're not yourself. Is everything okay?" And they want to explain, but how do you explain something you barely understand yourself? How do you tell someone that you're not sad, you're just seeing things differently, that the world they still believe in is starting to look like a performance you can no longer participate in? You can't, so they say, "I'm fine," and the distance grows a little wider. They start declining invitations, not out of anger or superiority, just exhaustion. The thought of another evening, pretending to care about things that don't matter, feels unbearable, and people take it personally, because when you stop playing the game, people think you're rejecting them. But you're not rejecting them. You're rejecting the script, the one that says you have to laugh at jokes that aren't funny, the one that says you have to chase things you don't want, the one that says you have to be available, agreeable, and easy. You're just done pretending. And this is where it gets lonely, because the world rewards pretending. It rewards people who fit in, who go along, who don't ask too many questions. It rewards surface-level harmony. And when you stop offering that, people don't know what to do with you. They don't hate you. They just don't understand you anymore. And that feels like loss, because it is. Friendships start to fade, not because of a fight or a falling out. Just a quiet drifting. You stop getting invited to things. Or you get invited, but it's clear you're an afterthought. And it stings, because these were people you cared about. People you thought knew you, but they didn't know you. They knew the version of you that fit into their world. And now that version is gone. Romantic relationships become even more complicated, because intimacy requires vulnerability. And vulnerability requires truth. And truth is the one thing most people are running from. They meet someone and feel a spark. But when they start being honest about who they are, the other person pulls back. Not because they're unlovable, but because they're real. And real is uncomfortable. Real asks you to look at yourself. Real doesn't let you hide. And most people aren't ready for that. So they end up alone, not by choice, but by consequence, because they can't go back to pretending, and they can't find anyone willing to meet them where they are. And for a while, this feels like punishment. Like they're being penalized for waking up, like they made the wrong choice. But then something shifts, slowly, quietly. They start to realize that the loneliness they're feeling isn't actually loneliness. It's space, space to think, space to feel, space to figure out who they actually are when no one is watching. And in that space, something unexpected happens. They start to like themselves, not in a loud, confident way, not in a look-at-me way, just a quiet acceptance. They stop apologizing for needing less. They stop feeling guilty for wanting something different. They stop trying to convince people that they're still the person they used to be, because they're not. And that's okay. They realize that most of what they called connection was just mirroring, two people reflecting each other's expectations, two people confirming each other's stories. It felt like intimacy because it was familiar, but it wasn't real. Real connection doesn't require you to shrink. It doesn't ask you to perform. It doesn't punish you for changing. And once you know that, you can't unknow it. So they stop looking for love in the places they used to look. They stop swiping through profiles, hoping someone will see them. They stop going to bars and parties, hoping to meet someone who gets it, because they realize that the kind of love they're looking for can't be found by searching. It can only be found by being. By living so authentically that the right person recognizes them from across the room. Not because they're trying, but because they're true. And this terrifies them, because it means they might be alone for a long time. It means they might never find what they're looking for. But it also means they'll never settle again. They'll never contort themselves into shapes that don't fit. They'll never pretend to want things they don't want. They'll never betray themselves for the comfort of being chosen. And that, they realize, is worth the wait. They start to see other people differently, not with judgment, but with clarity. They see how desperately everyone is trying to be seen, how much energy people spend curating their lives, how afraid everyone is of being alone. And they understand it, because they used to be the same way, but they can't go back to it. They notice how much of dating is performance. The carefully chosen photos, the rehearsed stories, the strategies and games and rules, and they want no part of it. Not because they think they're above it, but because they know it doesn't lead anywhere real. You can't build intimacy on a foundation of pretending. You can't love someone you're performing for. And you can't be loved by someone who only knows your highlight reel, so they withdraw further, not into bitterness or cynicism, just into honesty. They become the person who says what everyone else is thinking but won't say. They become the person who asks questions that make others uncomfortable. They become the person who refuses to laugh when something isn't funny. And this makes them magnetic to some people and invisible to others. The ones who are also awake, they notice. They see the refusal to pretend. They see the commitment to truth. And they're drawn to it like a signal fire in the dark. But these people are rare. So the encounters are few and far between. And that's the paradox. The more real you become, the fewer people can meet you there. But the ones who can are worth the wait. They start to understand that awakening is not a gift. It's a trade. You trade comfort for truth. You trade belonging for authenticity. You trade the illusion of connection for the possibility of real intimacy. And you have no idea if the trade will pay off. You just know you can't go back. They spend a lot of time alone. And at first, it feels like exile. Like they've been banished from the world they used to know, but slowly it starts to feel like sanctuary, a place where they don't have to explain themselves, a place where they don't have to translate their thoughts into language other people will accept, a place where they can just be. They discover that solitude is not the same as loneliness. Loneliness is wanting connection and not having it. Solitude is choosing space because it feeds you more than company ever did. And once you taste real solitude, the kind that nourishes you, you become very protective of it. You stop filling your calendar just to avoid being alone. You stop answering calls out of obligation. You stop saying yes when you mean no, because your time alone is sacred now. It's where you remember who you are. People think they're depressed. People think they're isolating. People think they need help, but they don't. They're just done pretending that shallow connection is better than no connection. They're done accepting breadcrumbs and calling it a meal. They're done shrinking so others feel comfortable. And that's not depression. That's clarity. They realize that most people are afraid of silence, afraid of what they'll hear if they stop moving, afraid of what they'll feel if they stop distracting themselves. So they fill every moment with noise, with people, with plans, with content, with anything. But when you're awake, silence is where the truth lives, and you need it, you crave it. It's the only place you can hear yourself. They stop explaining themselves, because explanation implies that something is wrong. And nothing is wrong. They're just different now. They want different things, they value different things, and they're not going to apologize for it. Not to their family, who wants them to be the person they used to be. Not to their friends, who miss the version that showed up to everything. Not to society, which wants them to participate in the same tired rituals. They're done shrinking. And this is when they start to feel powerful. Not in an arrogant way, not in a better-than-you way, just in a rooted, solid way. They stop being moved by other people's opinions. They stop needing validation. They stop checking to see if they're doing it right. Because they realize there is no right. There's just honest and dishonest. And they choose honest every time. They start to notice who else is awake. It's subtle. A look across a room. A comment that goes deeper than it needs to. A refusal to participate in the usual dance. And when they find these people, the connection is instant. Not because they have everything in common, but because they're both done pretending. And that's enough. These connections are different. They don't require constant contact. They don't need reassurance or validation. They don't collapse under the weight of honesty. They just exist, steady and real and easy, and they realize this is what they've been looking for all along. Not someone to complete them, not someone to save them, just someone who doesn't require them to lie. But these connections are rare, so most of the time they're still alone. And they've made peace with that. Because they've learned that being alone with themselves is better than being with someone and feeling alone anyway. They've learned that you can be surrounded by people and feel completely disconnected, and you can be by yourself and feel completely whole. They think about love differently now. It's not something they're chasing. It's not something they're afraid of missing. It's just something that will either happen or it won't, and if it doesn't, they'll be okay. Because they've built a life that doesn't require another person to make it meaningful. They have work they care about. They have thoughts that excite them. They have a relationship with themselves that's finally honest, and that's enough. But they also know that if love does come, it will be different. It won't be the kind of love that asks them to change. It won't be the kind of love that needs them to be smaller or quieter or easier. It will be the kind of love that sees them completely and doesn't flinch. The kind that isn't intimidated by their depth. The kind that doesn't need them to perform. And if that never comes, they'll survive. But if it does, it will be worth every lonely night that came before it. They start to see their aloneness as preparation. Not punishment. Every night they spend with themselves is practice. Practice in being honest. Practice in sitting with discomfort. Practice in not running from what they feel. And when someone finally comes along who can handle all of that, they'll be ready. Not because they've figured everything out, but because they've stopped pretending they have. They notice how much people lie to each other in the name of love. How they say, I love you, but mean I love what you do for me. How they say, I need you, but mean I need you to stay the same. How they say you're perfect, but mean you're perfect as long as you don't change. And they want no part of that. They'd rather be alone forever than loved conditionally. Because conditional love isn't love. It's a contract. And they're done signing contracts. They think about all the relationships they've lost, the friendships that faded, the lovers who left, the family members who stopped calling, and they feel sad about it, but they don't regret it, because staying would have meant betraying themselves, and they're not willing to do that anymore, not for anyone. They realize that the people who left weren't bad people. They just weren't their people, and that's okay. Not everyone is meant to walk the whole path with you. Some people are only meant to walk part of it, and when their part is done, holding on doesn't help anyone. It just creates resentment. So they let go, not with anger, just with acceptance. They start to trust the process, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it feels like they're losing everything, because they know that what's falling away was never truly theirs to begin with. The real things stay. The real people stay. And the rest was just clutter anyway. They stop asking, what's wrong with me? And start asking, what's right with me? Because there's nothing wrong with wanting depth. There's nothing wrong with needing space. There's nothing wrong with outgrowing people and places and versions of yourself. That's not brokenness. That's growth. And growth is supposed to be uncomfortable. They start to enjoy their own company, not in a lonely way, in a genuinely pleasant way. They like the conversations they have with themselves. They like the quiet mornings. They like not having to explain why they need to be alone. They like the freedom of answering to no one. And they realize this is what people are afraid of. This is why people stay in relationships that don't fit, why they cling to friendships that drain them, why they fill every silence with noise. Because if you actually enjoy being alone, you stop needing people. And that's terrifying. But it's also liberating. They become very selective about who they let in, not because they're closed off, but because they've learned the cost of letting the wrong people in, the cost of explaining yourself to people who don't want to understand, the cost of defending your choices to people who've already decided you're wrong, the cost of opening up to people who use your honesty against you. So they guard their inner world carefully. Not everyone gets access. Not everyone deserves it. They stop participating in conversations that don't matter. They stop debating people who aren't listening. They stop defending themselves to people who've already made up their minds. They just quietly withdraw and let people think whatever they want, because their peace is more important than being understood. They realize that most people don't actually want to know you. They want to know the version of you that makes them comfortable, the version that confirms their worldview, the version that doesn't challenge them. And the moment you step outside of that, they get uncomfortable. They say you've changed. They say you're not yourself. But what they mean is, you're not who I need you to be anymore. And that's their problem, not yours. They think about how much energy they used to spend managing other people's feelings, making sure everyone else was comfortable, making sure no one was upset, shrinking themselves so others could feel big. And they can't believe they lived that way, can't believe they thought that was love. It wasn't love, it was self-abandonment. And they're done with it. They start to speak their truth, even when their voice shakes, even when they know it will make people uncomfortable, even when they know it might cost them the relationship, because they've learned that silence costs more. Silence costs your self-respect. Silence costs your integrity. Silence costs your soul. And they're not willing to pay that price anymore. People say they're too intense now, too serious, too much. And they just smile, because they know too much is just code for more than I can handle. And that's okay. They're not for everyone. They're not trying to be. They become comfortable with being misunderstood, with being the villain in someone else's story, with being the one who walked away, because they know the truth. And the truth is enough. They don't need everyone to see it. They don't need everyone to agree. They just need to stay true to themselves, and they do. They start to see other awakened souls, scattered and rare, but there. People who carry the same quiet intensity, the same refusal to pretend, the same commitment to truth over comfort. And when they meet, there's no small talk, no performance, just recognition. A silent acknowledgement, I see you, you see me, and that's enough. These connections sustain them, even if they're brief, even if they never become something more. Just knowing that there are others out there who understand makes the loneliness bearable, makes it feel less like isolation and more like waiting, waiting for their people to find them, waiting for love that doesn't require translation, waiting for a life that feels true. And while they wait, they build. They build a life they don't need to escape from. They build work that means something. They build routines that nourish them. They build a relationship with themselves that's so strong it doesn't crumble when someone leaves. Because people will leave. That's guaranteed. But if you have yourself, you're never truly alone. They stop seeing their sensitivity as a weakness. They stop apologizing for feeling deeply. They stop trying to numb themselves just to fit in, because they realize their depth is their gift. It's what allows them to see beauty others miss. It's what allows them to connect in ways most people can't. It's what makes them real, and real is rare. They think about the person they used to be, the one who said yes to everything, the one who bent and twisted to make others comfortable, the one who believed that love meant sacrifice, and they feel compassion for that person. But they don't want to be them anymore. They've learned that love isn't supposed to hurt. It's not supposed to require you to betray yourself. It's not supposed to make you feel small. Real love expands you. It sees you completely and celebrates it. It doesn't punish you for growing. It grows with you. And if someone can't do that, they're not your person. No matter how much you want them to be, they stop forcing things. Stop trying to make relationships work through sheer willpower. Stop convincing themselves that if they just try harder, it will get better. Because they know now that real connection doesn't require force. It flows. And when it doesn't flow, it's not meant to. And that's okay. They become patient, not because they're giving up, but because they trust that what's meant for them will find them. They don't need to chase. They don't need to convince. They just need to keep being themselves. And the right people will recognize them. They start to enjoy the journey, not just waiting for the destination. They find beauty in the quiet mornings, in the books that change them, in the thoughts that surprise them, in the slow unfolding of becoming who they're meant to be. And they realize that this right here is the life, not the one they're waiting for, this one. They stop putting their life on hold until they find love. They stop waiting to be happy. They stop believing that something is missing, because they realize that nothing is missing. They're whole right now as they are. And if someone comes along and adds to that, beautiful. But if not, they're still whole. They think about how much the world fears people like them, people who don't need anything, people who can't be controlled with the promise of belonging, people who would rather be alone than fake, because people like that can't be manipulated, can't be sold to, can't be used. And that makes them dangerous, but only to systems that rely on people staying small. They stop seeing their solitude as something to fix and start seeing it as something to honor, a sacred space where they can hear themselves, where they can grow without interference, where they can become without apology. And they protect it fiercely. They realize that awakening doesn't make you better than anyone. It just makes you different. It gives you a different set of eyes, a different set of priorities, a different way of moving through the world. And that's not superior, it's just true. They stop judging people who haven't woken up yet because they remember what it was like, the comfort of not seeing, the ease of going along, the safety of the crowd. They understand why people choose it. They just can't choose it anymore, and so they walk alone, not forever but for now, knowing that the path gets narrower the further you go, knowing that fewer people can walk it with you, but also knowing that the ones who can are worth everything. They've learned that love, real love, isn't about finding someone who completes you. It's about finding someone who meets you in your completeness, someone who doesn't need you to be different, someone who isn't afraid of your depth, someone who sees your intensity and matches it. And until that person comes, they'll keep walking, keep growing, keep becoming. Because they know now that the struggle isn't a sign they're doing it wrong. The struggle is the confirmation that they're doing it right, that they're refusing to settle, that they're honoring themselves even when it costs them everything. And that's not a tragedy, that's courage. They sit with the paradox, the loneliness of being awake, the freedom of being true, the pain of losing people, the peace of finding yourself, and they accept it all, because this is the trade they made, and they'd make it again, every single time. They look at the world with clear eyes now. They see the games people play, the masks people wear, the lies people tell themselves, and they feel compassion for it, because they know how hard it is to wake up, how much it costs, how lonely it feels. But they also know it's the only way to be free. And so they wait, not desperately, not impatiently, just openly, for the person who sees them and doesn't run, for the love that doesn't ask them to dim their light, for the connection that feels like coming home. And until then, they have themselves. And that, they've learned, is enough. More than enough. It's everything.